Or we have names for it, like Murphy's Law, right? Something's always going to go wrong. That's right. Something is always going to go wrong. It's just kind of how this life is. So we have to make a decision in just this one little part. Is God really able to work all things together for good? This is just how I talk to myself in my own life. I just ask myself, when I realize I'm upset, when I realize I'm sinning, when I realize I'm petty, I just have to, James, do you really believe that God can work anything for good? Or is that just flowery garbage that we got in Romans 8? Or is it truth? Because if it's truth, then I'm called to believe it. And I'm called to walk in it. And I'm called to turn from that irksomeness. I'm called to turn from spewing that sin on others. I'm called to turn away from it. Now that's really hard, isn't it? Now John's going to go on here and he's going to say that God's commandments are not grievous. And this is going to come back to our first point. For about the first, I got saved when I was 16, so probably about the first 3 years of my Christian life, maybe 4. If someone would have asked me, do you think that God's commands are grievous? I remember even reading that verse when I was probably like 20. And I thought to myself, well, that's not true. I find his commandments to be very grievous. I find that all the things he tells me not to do and a bunch of the things he tells me to do, I find them very grievous. I find that when I wake up in the morning, a lot of times I don't want to read his word. I don't want to sit and pray. I don't want to do that. I want to get started on my day, or I want to read the news, or I want to watch a video, or whatever it might be. There can be a million things that I want to do. And so I looked at devotions as just a burden. Did I do them? Yeah, I did. I did them because I thought if I didn't, that God would be upset. And if he was upset, that he would somehow, the bad things would happen to me, or that just whatever. And so for a big chunk of my life, I just did stuff because I felt like I had to do it. And it was death. It was not good. It was a horrible existence. And so when we're looking at this and we're saying we're just talking about complaining, we're just talking about a devotion or something like that, we have to remember in our original point, John's writing to make sure that we have fellowship with God. In other words, when God says yes or no to something, the only reason for us, not the only reason, the main reason for us it's not grievous, is because when he says those things, they all revolve around, to the Christian, his invitation to have fellowship with him, to come back to that relationship. In fact, in John 15, when Jesus is talking about very similar things, and John records them, John even makes the point that Jesus looks at the disciples, the 12, the 11, Judas has already left, and he says to them, I don't call you servants. Some translations say slaves. It's the Greek word doulos, which is bondslave. Jesus looks at these 11 guys, and he says, I don't call you servants. I call you my friends. He says, because a servant doesn't know what his master is doing, but I'm telling you what I'm doing. And that's an interesting observation that John takes, because I'm not saying he's not the Lord. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve preeminence in our life. But Jesus' own reference to believers is, you guys are my friends. And I'm treating you like friends because I'm letting you know what I'm doing. And not just in that moment of the upper room discourse about the cross, but in life, in purpose. We're called the bride of Christ. Does a bride in a healthy relationship feel browbeat into serving her husband? Does a husband in a healthy relationship feel browbeat into the honeydew list? That's a miserable marriage. Wouldn't you say that? That if you're just doing stuff because your spouse will nag you if you don't, that's a miserable place to be. And if you're a spouse and you're nagging your spouse to do stuff, that's not right. It's not right. You know what each spouse owes the other? Nothing. That's how you look at it. You gave a vow. If you're a spouse, this is a side note, this one's free. If you're a spouse, you gave a vow that you would love in sickness and in health. You didn't make a contract with the person you married. It's not a contract. You didn't say, if you love me, I'll love you. You didn't say, if you appreciate me, I'll appreciate you. No, you said, I'll love you, and I'll cherish you, and I'll stick with you in poverty. You didn't say, if we get poor because the economy goes bad, then I'll stick with you. No, you said in poverty. If you screw up all finances, I'll stick with you. It's called a covenant. It's a marital covenant. It's not a marital contract. Marital contracts are death, and you can watch it in any relationship that has that dynamic. Any relationship where one spouse continually demands from another, they may do it. That spouse may do the things that you're asking, but you're driving them away, and you don't have genuine, open fellowship. You have a you owe kind of a thing. And it's crazy how it'll grow, won't it? Because it can be like, well, I did the dishes this last week, so you owe. Well, I bring my paycheck home, so you owe. No, everything in marriage is a gift. If you do the dishes, it's a gift to your spouse. If you cook, it's a gift to your spouse. If you bring home your paycheck, it's a gift to your spouse. They owe you nothing. And the sooner we can realize that they owe us nothing, it's between them and God, and it's all about the fact that I said I would do this, and you let go, the reality of a relationship is going to be incredible. You know why? Because it's just going to be fellowship. No one owes anybody anything. And now everything that gets brought to the table is a gift, and it's appreciated. Yeah, it's a very weird dynamic that we get into where we try to make our spouse our debtor. I don't know why I went off on that, but we'll just pretend it was like a Holy Spirit moment, so someone can just say that was for me, and then I'll feel better about myself. So, moving right along, in this thing that we're called to, he's bringing these up, he's talking about these things because we're called to believe. So anytime that we move away from that point and we move to complaining or sinning, whatever it is, what we're saying is, God, you can't use this. And we're denying his promises. So John's alerting us to that fact so that we can have fellowship with God. Not just to feel bad about ourselves or conviction, we can pound this a little bit. No. So that we can recognize when we're not in fellowship with God. Because some of us might classify our Christian relationship, depending where you're at, as burdensome, as difficult, as horrible, as just trudging through, trying my best. Like, we try to associate like the yoke. Jesus said, "Take his yoke upon him," and he said it's easy and light, but it's not because I have to read my Bible and go to church. And it's not, right? That's how we get. And so what John is saying is, look. When we go through sin, when we are struggling in our thoughts, we come back to God not so that we get from God, but so that we're in a position to have all that he has for us. When Chloe was about 8 years old, I told her, it was like a rainy day or something, and it's hard around here in the winter. And I was like, hey, you need to get off the iPad. Or whatever it was, the TV. I don't think maybe we didn't have an iPad then. Anyway, some sort of screen. And she was like pretty tore up about it. And I respect it. I mean, when you're in the middle of a show, to have to just put it down, I get it. I would feel grumpy too. And she said, I want to run away. And I was like, okay, so because you can't watch a show right now, you want to leave the house? She goes, yeah. And because this is probably not my best moment, but because I'm a good father, I was like, do you need some help packing? And she goes, you're going to, basically like, what? And I go, well, if you don't want to be here anymore, I mean, I guess that's an option. And so I said, hey, I'll get you a stick and like a handkerchief, and we can throw some food in it and whatever, and you can be on your way. Again, not my best moment. And so she started crying. And I said, well, hey, you can go out there if you want, but it's cold out there. It's raining out there. There's bad folks out there, and if you leave, I can't protect you from those bad folks. We might never see you again. But if you feel like you have to leave, you got to do what you got to do. And she said, well, I don't want to leave. And I said, well, good. I don't want you to leave it either. And if she had left, I would just follow her behind the bushes for a while. So I got cold enough, and she beat me in my own lesson, and I had to bring her home. But so, thankfully, it didn't get to that point. But the point is, if she had left, I wouldn't have stopped loving her. right? I wouldn't have thought, good, you little kid. Ha ha. You deserve it. I would have been brokenhearted, right? Would have bummed me out. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't have been that we stopped or withheld good from her. It's that she left it. It would have been her own fault if she was cold. Well, it would have been my fault, but you get the point. If she was cold and hungry and hiding in a bush. And see, that's what we do to God. That's the point. God is always reaching out to us. And when we find ourselves alone and cold and hungry and under a bush, He didn't put us there. We put us there. You know, one of the things that Jesus stresses in John 15, he says over and over, well, let's turn there, is this whole idea of abiding, this whole idea of sticking close to God. He says there in John 15:5, he says, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain, that's the same word that John uses. He uses the word, I think, 12 times in 9 verses, meno, to abide, to remain with, in here in John 15. He says, I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. He is not saying Christians go to hell. Do not buy that. He's saying that if you, fruit-wise, kingdom-wise, if you don't abide in Him, you're not worth anything as far as being productive. So he's saying, look, in a vineyard, because the whole point's a vineyard, right? When branches are gathered together, when they fall off or whatever, they can't do anything, so they just get rid of them. He's not saying you lose your salvation. He says, if you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such a branch is picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is like what we read last week in 1 John 3, right? This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in His love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you, and that your joy may be made complete. So Jesus, John records Jesus' words, and it's laid out so wonderful for us. He says, look, he says, as the Father loves me, I love you. Just let that sink in for a second. Just kind of repeat that in your mind. As God the Father has love for God the Son, that's the love that Jesus has for us. That seems pretty substantial, doesn't it? That's not like second-class citizen love. That's not like, my Father's my BFF, and you guys rank below that. He's literally saying, the same quantity of love that my Father has for me is what I have for you. That's an incredible love. That's why John, my opinion is, that's why John, in 1 John 3, he would start the whole chapter with, behold what kind, not kind, like kind in the species is really what the word means. Behold what species of love God has for us. It's an incredible love. It's an incredible sacrificial desire for fellowship and care. He says in Ecclesiastes, we're told, you have eternity set in your heart. You have eternity in your heart. In other words, you are of eternal origin. Nothing of this world can ever satisfy you. It's why you can have all the money in the world. It's why every interview I was actually talking to a guy, it's kind of funny, I was talking to a guy yesterday, and he was like, why is it that once musicians get clean and stop using drugs, all their music gets really depressing? And he used Elton John as an example. He's like, we ended up with Candle in the Wind after he got sober. So the idea, his point was this: once the altered mental status went away with famous rich people, they lose hope. The dream that so many of us are pursuing, the money, the comfort, the people that have it, they get depressed because it doesn't satisfy. But here this idea, he says, look, God loves us. If we remain in and now we're called, he says, remain in my love. He doesn't say, I'm going to take away my, he says, I want you to remain in it. And he says, this is how you remain in my love. If you keep my commandments, you remain or abide, meno, my love. just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. Now, he uses himself as an example of this idea. So we have to get away from, if I don't obey God, he doesn't love me. Because Jesus makes the point that the dynamic that he has with his Father is that he remained in his Father's love by obeying him. It's just like the illustration with Chloe. We have everything that we need when we stay near God. But when we begin to disobey, when we begin to insist on our things, then we distance ourselves from him. We don't receive everything that he has for us. Not because he withholds it, because we leave it behind.